Hello, everybody. My name is Kanan. I am with the Movie Boys. We run a little Instagram page doing movie reviews, stuff like that. So I thought I'd come on here and make a YouTube video on the box office. I was just wanting to kind of merge two of my interests, which is finance and movies. And then if anybody's interested, they can see if I'm any good at this. I'd love recommendations if I don't take something into account that maybe you think I should for next week. Um, but basically, these are just going to be my projections for this coming weekend with a couple new releases, Solo Mio and Dracula, as well as Strangers Chapter 3, and then a couple releases from last week, such as Send Help and Iron Lung. So, I guess without further ado, let's get to it. So I have right here the January box office. This is just kind of a look at how the box office is doing in general. So you'll see that this January was actually a really good one, even though we did have a pretty big bomb with 28 Years Later, Bone Temple. Um, Overall, though, 13% up from last year, and that last year was up 10% from the year before. So, a big part of that was Avatar. This coming January will probably be pretty solid too, with Dune 3 and Avengers Doomsday still going. So, I would expect next year's January to be pretty solid too, but overall, this was a pretty good January. Coming into February, really what we're looking for is that 480 number to try and keep it on pace for a good box office year. Hopefully, hit 9 billion domestic for the first time in a long time, I believe since 2019. But basically, I'm just going to be focusing on this weekend specifically. This past weekend, we had Send Help, Iron Lung, Melania, Zootopia 2, and Avatar. Those were the top five. I don't expect too much movement on the top two just because it did make a significant amount. Iron Lung was kind of a surprise there, and Send Help made about what I expected, maybe a little more. Thus far, my projections have not been too accurate, so obviously I'm not doing great. So, anyways, let's jump into this coming weekend. So, this coming weekend, we have a couple new releases, none that are huge, but a couple that will make a little bit of money. So, you have Strangers Chapter 3, Solo Mio, and Dracula. Those are kind of the main. I know it says limited, but it's a pretty wide release for Dracula and a pretty wide release for Strangers. So, we'll focus on those three, and then the other two we'll go into as well. So, this coming weekend, Send Help and Iron Lung, I expect to stay up on top. Send Help has a really strong reception, as you'll see right over here. It's a 93.87, which I know Bone Temple had a strong reception and didn't perform well, but it also started poorly. This one started pretty strong and seems to have a lot of word of mouth recommendations. So I think that will stay relatively high. So right here I have Send Help at making about 10 million, which would be a 47% drop, which is relatively above average. 50 to 55% is about the average drop. That's pretty solid. Anything below 60 is whenever you're getting into kind of a rough patch. So I expect both Iron Lung and Send Help to do pretty well this weekend as far as the drop off. So Iron Lung did much better than I expected. I knew nothing about it. So looking at that, the critic reviews aren't that great, but it's not exactly a movie made for critics. It doesn't seem like, because from a YouTuber and video game adaptation. So it seems like it's more so for the fans of that, and I think the fans have had a lot of word of mouth about it. I don't expect a giant drop off. I expect a relatively average drop off, and so with that, I have those as my top two of the next coming weekend. Part of this is also that we have a pretty weak release schedule for this weekend. So looking at what we have Dracula, which I don't expect to make a ton, but just based off of kind of theater times, you can see Strangers Chapter 3 and Solo Mio getting about the same amount of showtime. Strangers getting a little bit more. And then Dracula is actually getting less standard, but it did pull a XD formatting, which tells me that Cinemark thinks it'll at least draw in a little bit of um, audience. So we'll see how that works out. Right now, I do have that as my lowest performing of those three new releases, but I think that could easily be flipped. Um, so I don't have a ton to go off of based off of Dracula, but I can jump into the Strangers movies. So looking at the Strangers, chapter 1 and chapter 2, they are not exactly well received. They're not horribly received by the audiences, but it's just not great in general. The opening for the first chapter was 12 million, and it did have that kind of intrigue of what are they going to do, like what kind of story they're going to make. And then obviously it ended up being pretty bad, apparently. So jumping into chapter 2, we can look and see the drop off from that. So dropping from about 12 million to just under 6 million is not great. Typically, you'd want that to go higher, obviously. And the total number also dropped off pretty substantially. So, looking at this and looking at the ratings of it, which again were just not good, neither of them were. And we can take a look at those real quick to see just how poorly received they were. Strangers Chapter 2 was 54, which isn't that awful. 14 is really bad for critics, but kind of expected it. And chapter 1 was actually a little bit worse audience wise, but it's about the same. So looking at that, I wouldn't expect too much more than this just because neither of them were well received and there hasn't really been a big marketing push for this one. So I would just jump into this one to show y'all exactly what I'm thinking for that one. I'm thinking about 6 million. I would guess that if it's going to be over or under that, it'll be a little over just because it is the last of the three. I think at least some people that'll grab. People want to know where it's going. So it has a little bit of the intrigue that the first one had. The second one basically had none. And so the third one, I think it will benefit a little bit, but also it just has a lot of competition with horrors in general. You have Send Help with the horror comedy, Iron Lung, which is the video game adaptation, but it is horror elements, and then obviously Dracula as well, which with the Cinemark screening XD of Dracula, that does tell me maybe they have a little bit more confidence in it. So I don't know if I was to do this again, maybe I'd flip these two, but I'll go ahead and keep them there for right now. For the total weekend, I have 60 million. That's going to be from all movies across anything. So that's kind of my guess at how this weekend is going to go, which looking at last February around this same time, it wasn't a great weekend either. Didn't have any great new releases. So I think it'll perform a little bit better. Like I said, I have it at about 60 million for the overall gross. So about 10% better, which isn't a small amount, but overall, I don't think it'll be too big of a deal. But I do think it'll be positive nonetheless. So I'll just jump into my kind of last one, and that's Solo Mio. So most people have this projecting at about 5 million, with the high end being 6. I'm jumping to about 7. I think that this one is going to be a slight surprise for how well it does. Number one, it has no um, competition really as far as the type of movie it is, which is supposed to be kind of this heartwarming romantic sort of movie, and there's just nothing out right now that's competing with that. So what I would do is jump to kind of past Angel Studios releases. None of them are exact fits, but one of them that jumped out to me was Homestead. I know it's a completely different type of movie, but looking at this movie, it had very little marketing from what I remember, and it still opened at 6 million. I think there's a pretty big group that likes to go to Angel Studios releases because they kind of know what they're going to get. They kind of know it's going to be a sort of comfort movie. It's not going to be anything too crazy. And I think it'll do pretty well, but none of that has even mentioned Kevin James doing his kind of Instagram marketing push where he's acting like the teacher, which I think has also been pretty popular. So I think it'll do well. If anything, I actually think it'll do better than 7 million. So ideally, I'd like all of these to be higher than what I'm projecting, but this is kind of what I'm looking at right now. Next week, I'll go into the results just to see how far off I was. Could be a lot. I expected 28 years later Bone Temple to do pretty well, and I was very wrong about that. Um, I also expected Send Help to do about 15 rather than the 19 that it ended up doing, and I expected Iron Lung to do about 9 rather than the almost 18 that it ended up doing. So far I haven't done too well, but I'd love recommendations on maybe how I can get some more accurate projections. I can go into a little bit more wider scope if anyone's interested in that. And we can also do movie reviews, stuff like that. But for right now, I'm just going to start with something I like talking about, know what I'm talking about a little bit. And that's kind of just the box office numbers in general. So right now, we're hopefully looking at what'll be a good year for the box office. Generally, I think it hasn't been over 9 billion since 2019. You'll see right there. Big part of that was in game, and then you had COVID, and then you don't really have this big Marvel story happening as well anymore. In a lot of the franchises have kind of run out, so I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing we're at this level because there's a lot of big streaming movies too. But I do expect this year for us to touch that 9 billion mark for the first time. So if y'all have any interest in hearing more about the wider scope, I'd be happy to jump into that. But otherwise, I will just jump on next week and talk about the releases coming out for Valentine's Day, which there are a lot. And it's an extended weekend, so should be pretty good with President's Day. So I'm excited to talk about that one. This weekend's kind of weak, pretty bad weekend to start, honestly, but I figured I may as well just go ahead and start it. So yeah, again, let me know if you have any recommendations or any way y'all can help me. Because like I said, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just um, trying my best to see what happens and see if I can get better at it as the time goes along. It's just something I've been interested in for a while, so I figured I'd just talk about it. So, all right, well, that's all.